Hello everybody, welcome back to my series going over every Pokemon in this game. Now, this episode is about the Golduck. Golduck is a very interesting Pokemon and very unique in exactly how it functions. Now, it's got the Slumbering Sleep type, which is standard for water types, but its pre-evolution Psyduck is the Dozing type. Now, I also was recently made aware that I forgot to mention in the Pikachu video, or the Raichu video, that the Pichu actually has the Slumbering type, so go back there, you want to hunt Pichu, I guess. Remember to slumber for Pichus, but snoozing for the rest of the Pikachu line. For Golduck, on the other hand, you'll find it in Slumbering or Dozing. However, you probably don't want to catch it as a Golduck, because you want that free skill level off of evolving it, and you want that extra inventory, given that it is a skills mon. So you want to catch it as a Psyduck, so you really want to be catching it off of Dozing if you want to be hunting it. Now, it is of the skill specialty, as I previously said, and it is unique, given that it is the only Pokemon in this game that has the skill specialty and the Charge Strength S skill. Now, Charge Strength S is just one of the weakest skills in the game, like by numerical value. So, this brings about a question of how could this skill ever be good on a skills mon? How could a skill specialist dedicated to this skill possibly be good when there's literally a stronger version of this Charge Strength M, and it's not variable, and it's just a stronger version? Well, the way that the Golduck goes about that is by having an absurdly high skill trigger rate. Really high skill trigger rate, to the point where it just is proccing left and right if you have any sort of skill trigger, sub-skills on it, or speed. Now, it's a bit on the slower side. 56 minutes and 40 seconds is actually really slow. But it's proccing at 12.5%, which is 1 in 8 helps. Even if you round this to an hour, that means it's proccing once every 8 hours. That's like 3 times a day. That is if it has 0 energy, and it has no skill trigger stats, no help speed stats. It's proccing about 3 times a day. Granted, that sounds bad, especially for a weaker skill like this, but it's also the variable version, which, if you don't know, the variable versions of skills like this, both for Charge Strength and for Dream Shard Magnet, the variable versions do produce more on average than the fixed versions, because they made the fixed versions lower in the range that the variable versions can cover. So I think that's kind of the trade-off, is they have reliability. Meanwhile, these ones are higher average, but they're less reliable because they can proc lower. But yeah. Now, it's got 14 inventory, which is pretty small, but the Golduck doesn't really care that much about inventory. In fact, if it just gets 1 evolution, it's got 19, which I'll be showing is plenty for this guy to have enough inventory. Realistically, if you want to run the Golduck, you want to run him all day, or you want to run him during the day mostly, probably not at night. If you're running him on your night team, then I guess the inventory will help a little bit in terms of waking up to double procs, but if you're filling this guy's inventory, even if you have minimum inventory, he's probably going to have a double proc anyway. Roughly 1 in every 6 helps will be an ingredient. Even if his ingredient list kind of works against him, because the apples are such a big proc. Ideally, you want the cocoa on this guy, just because you're not getting much usage out of the ingredients that he's making anyway, and there are better producers for apples. If you want a non-ingredient specialist alternative to producing apples, the better option is probably Raichu, because it doesn't get bothered by inventory being filled up, and it's producing a lot of apples anyway, and it's got it at base, so I would suggest that if you're looking for a non-ingredient specialist alternative to Skeledirge. However, this is a decent amount of apples, and it produces apples and cocoa, which I'd be remiss to not mention that apples and cocoa do go nicely into the Petal Dance Chocolate Tart, which is like right on my cutoff line of meals worth considering. I like the Petal Dance Chocolate Tart because I think that there's some potential with how many mons there are that have apples and cocoa. I think it's mostly just Golduck and Absol, but still, they can cover this meal by themselves. In fact, a single-handed Absol I think can cover it, but that's a discussion for a different day. Now, why the inventory Usually inventory is a huge thing on skill specialists because it increases their chances of having a double proc after being left alone for a certain amount of time, after being left alone until their inventory fills, and especially being left overnight. Now, the Golduck, however, has such an absurdly high skill trigger rate that it doesn't really matter because it's probably going to have those things anyway. So let's just take one that has 19 inventory. It's been evolved once. Let's pretend that it's gonna help roughly 3 sets of 6 in a night. So it'll get 3 ingredient procs, most likely, statistically. So 3 sets of 6, 3 ingredient procs, roughly. Maybe like 2. That means you're gonna get roughly 15 helps throughout the night with base Golduck, I think. 15 or 14. I'll just put a low ball on it. Because it maybe will get the lower tier at the Coco at base instead. So even if you just estimate about 14 helps in a night, if you're looking for 2 successes, if you do the binomial distribution calculator on this, which this is a different website that just does quick math. Basically the number that you're looking for is this one. The odds of you rolling at or above 2 helps, or 2 skill triggers, is 68.7%. Now that seems kind of bad, but keep in mind this is a Golduck that doesn't have any skill trigger subskills, doesn't have any inventory subskills at all, doesn't have any nature. It is just flat estimating its base odds of waking up to a double proc. It also doesn't keep into account ribbons, which is another way to increase inventory. It only is a Golduck that's been evolved from a Psyduck. And it's got more than coin flip odds of having a double proc in the morning. If we're looking for just 1 proc, well, that changes the odds to 91%. So, yeah, the Golduck is a really, really strong option. It's among one of the strongest for general strength across all islands, since it's not relying on favored berry or any particular meal type. It'll produce roughly the same amount every week, which means that it's lacking any particular specialization. So it'll be outproduced by a really strong berry specialist with favored berry. It'll be outproduced by a really strong ingredient specialist that is producing one of the highest tier meals. But there is something to be said about having just a generalist that can go anywhere and always be at least good. It might not be the best, but it'll always be good. However, something to warn you about the Golduck is that if you're not checking the app enough to collect these triggers, it is weaker, and it does significantly go down in value just by not checking as much. Now, I can just prove this by using the production comparison option of the Raynon X calculator, if it would load. There we go. If I bring in a Golduck, and I tell it to be level 50, and I say it's got skill trigger M and skill trigger S, just as a throwing one in there, and I tell it that I am checking the app 24/7, no good camp ticket, it's going to proc roughly 9.6 times a day, which is a lot. In fact, in terms of value, let's give this guy a bunch of skill seeds. If I crank his skill all the way up, he's producing 44,000 a day. Even if I just change this from checking it to 24/7 to checking it every 10 minutes, it's about the same. But you'll see that as I tick this up a bit more, it starts to go down. And it starts to exponentially go down. And if you hit like 2 hours, you see that you've lost about 2,000 value. And if you go up to 3 hours, it's lost significantly more, about 5,000 from its initial. And if you go up to 4 hours, then it's gone all the way down to 36,000. Now, I know for a fact, I've talked with Raynon X before. I messaged him over Discord. This calculator doesn't account for double procking yet. So, realistically, the impacts of not checking as often are not what this is going to show. This is assuming the old mechanics where they could only hold 1 skill bank. So it's not as harmed as much as it once was. However, it still does go to show, let's say you check it once every 7 hours, this guy is almost at, like, 2/3 the efficiency that he once had. So, if you're not checking the app as often as you need to manage the Golduck, then I'd highly recommend an Ampharos or Espeon, who do the same job, but use the stronger Charge Strength M to do it rather than many procs of Charge Strength S. If you're checking the app enough, then the Golduck will be stronger than them, but without checking the app constantly, the Golduck's just going to be weaker. And as far as catching the Golduck goes, he exists. I know he exists at Greengrass and Cyan for sure. Oh, the Golduck only exists at Cyan, but the Psyduck, I know they also exist at Snowdrop. The Psyduck exists pretty much everywhere except for top. So if you want to hunt it, once again, I don't recommend catching it as a Golduck, so you wouldn't necessarily need to go to Cyan Beach. But you're going to get more candies for it if you go to Cyan Beach, because you'll also get Golduck spawns. But any of the islands except for top is where to go to hunt the Golduck. I wouldn't recommend it too much for free-to-play players, just because it is a 2-stage skills mon, when you could have a mon that fills a very similar role with one less seed of investment by hunting the Ampharos, who has 3 stages of evolution. But that is just about everything there is to cover about the Golduck. Yeah, also, I said apples and cocoa. It's got sausage. That's kind of its troll ingredient that they throw in there last minute just to ruin our day. So you don't really want the sausage. It's not really synergistic. However, it is a smaller proc than the apple, so it's not filling as much inventory for the Golduck, so you'll get more helps. So maybe it's better than the apple. I don't know. They're all kind of a horse apiece, but yeah. It's pretty easy to evolve. 40 candy only. But yeah, that's about everything to do with the Golduck, and I hope you have enjoyed and have learned something today.